Welcome to the fourth episode of Toots Your Own Horn, a podcast series documenting the creation of a new kind of classical play festival featuring female playwrights. I'm Alex Karolyi, and I'm the artistic director of Shadowpath, a theater company that is researching and exploring how to produce this festival, which we have named Theater Out of the Shadows. This episode will reveal what truly shocked us about speaking with other female theater festival organizers and bring you up to speed with our script reading committee's latest assessments. First, we were surprised to see how many women leaders, organizers, directors in theater had never even realized that classical female playwrights existed. Many couldn't name one, nor any other festivals that focused on female classical playwrights.
What other festivals do you know of that mainly focus on classical female playwrights?
I don't know anyone who's doing classical female playwrights.
Yeah, most people don't. Unfortunately, I mean, maybe that's a good thing for us because we're, we can now say that that's happening, but it's kind of shocking.
I am, when I was reading your questions, I thought, I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't know that I can even list classical female playwrights.
I didn't know there were any classical works by women.
You're the first. And I had to double read it, and I was like, and part of me was like, wow. And it's amazing. Why, right? It's why.
That's mostly, unfortunately, are a very common answer from women that are well-versed in theater, in works by women, are still sort of saying, because they're not on main stages, they're not being educated in classrooms, and why?
Yeah.
So, because I mean, it's not that there's like, a dozen that we don't know about. There's thousands.
I just didn't think they existed.
Do you know of any other classical play festivals by women, like female classical play festivals?
I do not. One of my goals is to start getting this work in the hands of Shakespeare festivals all over the world. I want them to consider this work because they're leaving half the population out.
Why are these influential and important contributors to world theater being left out of classrooms, main stages, and festival programming? It certainly raises the stakes and makes our work on this festival relevant and necessary to educate not just the general public, but the theater industry at large. Now we go back to August 2020, where myself, my associate producer Maissa, Chantal, Tsholo, and T share their thoughts on the programming potential for 3 more classical plays by women.
We are starting off right at the 10th century, approximately 940. That blows my mind away, with a play called Dulcitius, written by Roswitha, who was a nun.
I didn't love it. However, it's a cool kind of baseline for all the things that come after. It did also think it was interesting that even though it was like used to teach religious and human moral lessons, she also did make it a comedy, which I feel like, not that I've read a ton of biblical plays, but that doesn't seem to be the usual. Like they usually seem a little bit more serious, and I like that she used some comedy.
I thought it was very interesting that a man's pride was hurt, even though the women were not even at fault. And then he was like, well, I'm going to punish the women because my pride was hurt. So I was just like, okay, well, that's still true.
There was no question about putting themselves in whatever harm might come their way for the sake of chastity or God. Even Job questioned what was happening to him and lamented his fate. But then I started thinking of it like a cartoon, because cartoons are like that. Like when you go in and you rape the pots and pans and you come out all black. Oh my God, that was a pot. So when I started thinking of it as a cartoon, I liked it better.
I really liked the fact that she was taking stance that women at that time weren't taking, challenging religion it talks about rape. And so I think there is something to talk about rape culture within that and maybe bring that in. I think if we looked at it in a different way, we can challenge rape culture and challenge the way that we're viewing all of religion and the way women are looked at.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to consider the target audience, which was pretty much, this was being performed in the convent mostly. And so that would be mostly nuns and women. Even though this is considered her worst play, I actually like it the best, maybe because it is so bizarre and weird. Like there's a lot of this like clown-like pots and pans business, and then that kind of gets like dropped. Like I find the play is very inconsistent. I do think that the thing that I was taken aback by was the fact that this is a comedy about rape, but I think the fact that the virgins stand up against the authoritative figures is huge. I give it 8 for the festival because I think it is such a education piece as far as who this playwright was. And even if you just learn about her influences, like the Terentian style, this playwright named Terence, which I never heard of before, he was a Roman African playwright during the Roman Republic, and his comedies were performed for the first time around 160 BC. And around this time, plays were hardly being written, you know, like dramatic texts were almost unheard of. So the fact that she was able to even write this down, and not just write it down, produce it, perform it. There's evidence that these were actually not just writings, but actual productions. Our second play is a Spanish play written in 1635. It is called Courage, Betrayal, and a Lover Scorned by Caro.
Reading this, I really wanted to like see it on stage. The stage combat is very strong in itself. I think there's a lot of comedy to be had with this piece. But the soliloquies or monologues where they went into this big, like really poetic piece, I kept envisioning like an ensemble doing a lot of movement pieces, choreo pieces, and it just looked very beautiful. And I thought, and I could hear it with like accompaniment, like strings, guitars, things like that.
It took me so long to read this play. I did like the fact that Leonore, like the character, went so far into the man's persona, because normally like in the Shakespearean plays, there's lots of cross-dressing women, but they don't tend to go so far into like the bravado and the sword fighting and all of that. And like the, you know, actually using a woman to prove a point to a man. But yeah, the language was killer. Like it was so flowery and poetic, and I just didn't care enough about the characters to want to read that.
I didn't like this one at all either. I hated the soliloquies. I thought they were too long. It wasn't my cup of tea.
It had the very, very similar themes to Man's World. Like the whole thing about double standard and how men can get away scot-free and go around doing it again and again and again and again. And women, if you don't get pregnant, your reputation is ruined. And if you do get pregnant, that's it. Either way, you're done forever. And I mean, it's not new or anything, but she just put it out there on a plate, and we get the same thing in 1920 whatever. And in a way, I think that it can be relevant to a contemporary audience, because how many people take back the guy or the woman that treated them like shit?
This play actually was staged 2 years ago off Broadway in New York and did very well. I liked that there were strong female characters that were outthinking their male counterparts again. This was written around 1635 in Spain. At this time, she was influential because women were writing a lot of lyrical poetry and religious texts, as we know. So she was taking a well-known character or archetype of Don Juan and kind of spinning it and making him look foolish and silly, like he can be outsmarted by these women that he's done wrong. Alrighty, moving on to our final play. This was written by Gertrude Stein, who I didn't even know was a playwright. This is called Three Sisters Who Are Not Sisters, written in 1943.
At first, I was just very confused. I was like, what is going on? But then the more I started to read it, it took me back to like when I was a kid and was playing like cops and robbers and was just like I like my mind was just so imaginative and carefree and without rules and judgment. It's dark, and it really reminded me of all the creepy old lullabies like Ring Around the Rosie and like the Rockabye Baby. So it reminded me of all the like really dark, creepy children's lullabies.
It reminded me a little bit of like a Ionesco play, you know, where you go from one thing to another, but it didn't go absurd, like really absurd enough. It stayed in the room with the kids. And I thought I really should like this more. And I thought I must be missing something, but I couldn't find it.
I really like this play. It was weird, like I am. I called her, the playwright, the granddaddy of questioning fake news. I like how it was sort of like poetic. Like every time things would repeat or things would be said, I just heard rhythm. I would love to stage something like this because I think you could really play around with it. It talks about murder, it talks about police brutality from a child's point of view. I thought that was so cool. You're setting this with children. Imagine having children of different ethnicities possibly play this and talk about police brutality.
I didn't love it, but I liked it. So the first time I read it, I was like, what is happening? This is crazy intense and like really neat. And I don't understand. Like, and I got to the end, I was like, okay, I feel like this is absurdist. And I feel like there is like a moral question that we're getting at, but I'm not sure what it is. And I literally wrote, I'm not sure of the point. I look forward to the conversation where I might be enlightened.
I think the thing that bothers me the most is the children aspect. But then I think, or either I want it to be about adults acting like children. And I think that you have to look at when this play was written in 1943 during the war. And I just think that that had to have some effect on why she was writing this play and what she was trying to say. Maybe making it children makes it easier to digest in a way. It's so dreamlike, it's so interpretive, all things that I love. I think in any kinds of work like this, you're always seeking and searching for the meaning. But I think the point is the meaninglessness of it. I think it's an interesting opportunity to explore what it's symbolizing.
Maybe I like it better from hearing your perspectives of it and the openness of it, like the fact that there is so little actually on the page that gives you so much space to bring what you want to bring to it.
I also heard it very like you said earlier, like rhythmic, and I would like to hear it with some like a beat, like some drums.
What he just said about the drums, instantly I started hearing a heartbeat and like the heart racing as things get more intense, and then like just stopping when you're just like when something changes and they have a realization and then it starts up again.
I think there's so many interesting ways to do this play. Like this would be cool if we did this play with like 3 different directors and it's all based on interpretation. And I think that's the strength behind this writing, which seems very simple and almost juvenile. And I just think that there's endless ways to do this. And I think it could work virtually and in person. September and October 2020 brought 6 more plays up for discussion, as well as Jillian, a new script assessor to the team. We're going to jump into Trifles by Susan Glaspell, which was written in 1916.
I didn't like how the women were portrayed at the beginning, so I was unsure if I was going to enjoy it. And then it turned out to be super smart. It gave that like perception of like, here is what a woman's place is in the world, except for not at all. You're so wrong. They're very smart. I think there's a sad relevance in the fact that, you know, oftentimes women's opinions are still not deemed as worthy as a man's when it's a group of men judging it.
There was a lot of repetition between knot and quilt. And, you know, like a quilt is putting something together and a knot is finishing something and tying a knot around somebody's neck. Like, I just like the metaphor of it and the discussion about when is it okay to kill someone? Is it ever okay to kill someone? And there's that whole gray space of right and wrong. And, you know, like, I just like that it addressed so many things so quietly.
I loved the bird reveal. I thought that was so very smart. at first I was like, what is this play going to be about? And then it did kind of hook me in. And I thought it was very interesting that the main characters aren't the main characters. So Minnie and her husband are who the story's about, but we don't actually see them. I didn't feel like there was like enough action maybe for it to be like, oh, this is something.
There was this underlining of mental health that was also sort of like talked about that I really liked, and also how the women were the ones paying attention to sort of that. The women would discover such amazing things within the script, but I just found that the men just came in and just said foolish things and then left.
I'm growing to like this script more and more. When I first read it, I really dismissed it. Like I didn't really care so much. But I knew Maissa loved it, and I kept trying to like figure out why, you know? And every time I read it, I feel like I get it a little bit more. And I feel like the simplicity of the script is part of its brilliance. When you read critiques or the history of this script, they're talking about it like it's the best piece of American theater, like ever. The one thing I didn't like that kind of like irks me, because she's supposed to be like, you know, the powerhouse of feminist theater. I don't like that she doesn't give the two women first names, that they're just Mrs. Peters and Mrs. Hale portrayed as women.
On purpose, though.
What's that?
Yeah.
Because women are so discounted, they don't have names. But men, no matter how, you know, dumb or irrelevant that their actions, they get names.
Actually, I thought it was intentional.
Yeah.
That it was just like, that it was very much like, you are the wife of, everything is so like, you're just this, you are just the wife of.
And there's this whole societal thing, like they watched this happen. The whole town watched her disintegrate before their eyes, and nobody did anything.
Okay, moving along to our second play, which was also written in the same year, 1916, called Rachel by Angelina, Weld, Grimke.
I like this. I thought it was really smartly written. I thought the growth in Rachel was really sad, but also beautiful. I thought it was a pretty deep dive into the psyche of the female. It really did dive into her psyche and what she's experiencing, more than just like, here's a woman doing something that maybe we don't always see. It was like, here's really understanding how it's happening and what the pain is and the whys, and that all of the mixed emotions.
I loved it, just because I think it's so relevant. Relevant specifically in terms of Blackness and the Black struggle. Like, these conversations are still happening. This was written in 1916. The idea that parents have to think about bringing children into this world, this messed up world. Black parents talk about it all the time.
The scene with the roses is just so beautiful and poetic and so heart-wrenching. And the fact that this was written in 1916, it's over 100 years old. And yet, like, I went to theater school, and in theater school, I never read anything like this. This perspective is something I never came across in theater school. And the reality of systemic racism, of beautiful, incredible people held, like we, as women talk about the glass ceiling, this is like 10 times that. And the land of laughter is that whole story that she tells to bring herself back. I just think is so beautiful, in that the one thing that cannot be taken is joy.
The whole thing about it's more merciful to strangle children at birth and put them through life, and Rachel, who so desperately wanted children, not having them, it's like she's killing potential before it can manifest. And there was a point that Sarah made about trying to find plays that have a more positive message. How many of these can we do without balancing them and saying there's also this somewhere?
I thought that this is, yes, heartbreaking and a tragedy, because you see this loving family that are even take in and adopt this child, and you just see the murder of the spirit of this woman. And this play also talks about a lot of this backstory of what happened to the father and the brother, this lynching, which is so traumatic, but it's brought up, and the characters, you spend the rest of your time watching these characters deal with that information and not being able to. Out of all the scripts I've read, which are many, this is one that stays with me. Moving on to our last play by Sophie Treadwell, written in 1928, called Machinal or Machinal.
I loved this play. I liked the choreography of movement and sound and words. It was such a created experience. And I like the way we just got fragments or glimpses, just enough to put you in a place. And then you had to fill in the rest. And there were all these inconsequential characters that created a tapestry. It was like a film play.
It felt like a movie. It felt like I was watching a soap opera, like little segments of like episodic, lifespan of somebody until death. And I love the use of also like the sound and that being a whole character on its own. One thing that this bugged me so much, but I think it's the times as well, and it's very relevant. I hated the fact that when she was questioned, she literally said, "two big, dark-looking men."
I thought it was like very interesting and very clever and very theatrical, but I found that that's all it was. For me, there wasn't enough actual story here or enough action.
But I really liked, I think the same vignettes that you guys are talking about in the bar. I liked the specificity of them because it just told you what kind of place she was in without telling you what kind of place she was in. Just their little conversations about the pedophile man. I was like, oh, wow, that's why did you put that in there? But I love that it was in there. But I was like, this is so random, but it's so good that it's there, because you're just like, all of the little things, you're just like, yeah, I get exactly where you are, which is a place that you normally would never have been. And here you are with the telephone girl. And like stylistically, I saw like this, kind of like I don't know if you guys saw The Overcoat, but like this movement of the office that was like equally movement and dialogue based, the way that they interacted, the way that the machine functioned. Like it was literally the cogs of a machine going, and you would see that in the movement part of it. And like same thing in the bar, where it's just like the way that each of the tables moved gave you this feeling. And then there's them in the center table that's very still as she's watching everything spin, the machine move around her.
We are now talking about De Montfort by Joanna Baillie. This was written in the 1800s. What do we think?
I had such mixed feelings about this one. I really liked it at the beginning. Like I liked the intrigue so much. Like I was like, what is up with De Montfort? What's happening? I liked that it was more in his mind than it was, some big epic thing that had happened. So I thought that was really intriguing. And then I didn't like the ending. I wanted there to be more of the ideas at the beginning and the end. So like I wanted there to be a weird back and forth between Rosenvelt and De Montfort. I felt that throughout, even though the story was interesting, I didn't love that the women were kind of boring, and that the Jane could just say, my brother was so good except for this one small fault that was in his mind and caused him to murder somebody.
I had mixed reviews about this one too. I love the writing, but there aren't really any huge twists throughout. I had this wild thought, if they were actually lovers, so you made it a queer story between the two of them, and that's where this hatred comes because of the time. It would be so wrong to be so in love with someone like that. If they have a kiss and then he kills them, and I think that would give a little bit more justification to the complicated hatred and the self unraveling.
It kind of reminds me of, we had this discussion about this play, Three Sisters Who Are Not Sisters. We were talking about depending on the director and how this play was cast, it can be about so many things. Very fascinating if that was also a motivational reason for him to hate himself and commit crime. And
Yeah, I think that's a really cool idea.
I did think that it was a very interesting study in all-consuming hatred and all-consuming obsession. She was talking about like obsession with this guy that I hate, and I'm like, I hate. But then I was thinking about a friend of mine who has fallen for the conspiracy thinking. And all of a sudden, this balanced friend that I had, you can't talk to her anymore. Like she's on this high-speed train to Crazy Town, and like there's no getting her off. She was focusing on rage or hatred, but I think you can put it on anything where you get on this track and you can't get off.
I really liked this play. I love the atmosphere of it. I loved it was like moody. I agree that there weren't a lot of twists, but I kind of liked that about it. You kind of know what you're getting. But to me, I found it was like a page turner. Like he was getting more and more mad. He was losing his mind. And you just see his slow demise. But it's like I couldn't stop like being so involved with seeing it to the very end. So unfortunately, the ending I didn't like, but I really liked it. It was one of my favorite plays. Oh, this one written by Eliza Lanesford Cushing, called The Fatal Ring, written in 1840, who we are calling the first female Canadian playwright.
I tried so hard to like this. What could be said in one sentence was just like a whole monologue. I think my notes are like, I'm on page 10 and it's taking forever to say you can't come to court because you're too pretty and the king will take your virginity and ruin you as a woman for me as a man. Oh wait, they're married, just kidding.
Yes, I agree. This was one of the hardest plays for me to get into, but something happened. I started to like get into it, like, 70% of the way there. And, it's not fair what happened to her, basically. Like, no one's talking about the fact that she was set up and that she falls from grace and it's still all her fault. But all that being said, I did give it a 7. But that is all playwright points because I just, playwright, Canadian. It's our only Canadian play.
I didn't like it for a long time either. It was too long, too many monologues. It was just like, we can do this whole thing in 10 pages. But there was a turning point for me too. And then I was like, oh, I kind of don't hate this. There were no redeeming characters here. The Count was foolish. His wife was honorless. The Duke was a philandering asshole. His sister was a manipulator. Her friend was a bigger manipulator. I mean, I think she wrote religious plays prior to this, right? She was very pious and like, if we don't behave, this is the life. I think an excerpt could be taken from this and it would be engaging for a contemporary audience, for its historical, first Canadian thing, and because there's that kind of intriguey, the fatal ring. There's an interesting, cool play in there.
I had a medium experience. I didn't hate it. I did have to start it 3 or 4 times though. And then I actually started to become intrigued because they'd been talking about her like she was so weak-willed and all women were like this. And then she came back and she was just like, she basically guessed everything. She's like, well, he probably said this and this is probably what you're worried about. And this isn't who I am. And I think you should go to the king and you should do all that you can so that you're in his favor, so that you get this and this, so that we can have this. I was like, oh no, she's manipulative or at least smart. And so then I was intrigued as to what she was going to do, how it was going to work, because they all thought of her as this thing. And in actual fact, she wasn't this thing. She was like kind of human and real and more than they thought of her, which I really liked. And I thought it was interesting that everybody was like kind of shitty and shady. When she acted exactly as the Baron had predicted and went for the king, it was over for me. It just played exactly into what the uncle said and exactly into all of the shitty stereotypes of females.
Moving on to Marita Bonner's play called Exit, an Illusion, written in 1929.
I love this play. I love the way I was so focused the whole time trying to work out what was happening. And she laid it out like it was so up. It was like watching Sixth Sense. It was right there the whole time. And I liked that it was kind of a colorblind play. The characters are black and she is sort of lighter skinned. But I thought that this could have taken place between any two people. It didn't matter. It was another obsession play, and it was another play where everything is happening in his head.
Oh man, I also loved it too. It was that thing of like trying to figure it out, and then all of a sudden I got to the end and was like, whoa. It was so clever. Just what you said, it was all like laid out there to begin with.
I also really liked it. I felt like it was a circle. I disagree with Maissa. I don't think it was anywhere near colorblind. I think that was actually one of the most important parts of it was the fact that he was dark-skinned and she was light-skinned, and his obsession with her, with the fact that exit might be white, and like the fact that he was like, you're going out passing. So I actually think that was just like, it was a big conversation about shadeism.
Yes, there was that. But what I meant by that was we've had a lot of Black playwrights, and the part about being Black leads to a lynching or leads to their place in society, or like it's very like cut and dry. This is what happens when you're Black. This is what happens when you're Black. This is what happens. Whereas this one, they were Black, and that was his issue. But this could have been a couple, any couple.
Oh, I see. So yeah, okay. I really liked it. I thought that death personified was super interesting, and I also thought that it would be a cool thing to have a discussion after. Not that it needs it, but I thought it would be a really interesting discussion about just the imagery and the effects that it would have.
I really like this too. I think it's power packed with so many things, and like the title delivers. It's exactly what I want it to be. It's this relationship, and it's dreamlike, but it's dreamlike. Like sometimes you read these sort of dreamlike plays and it's just like tiresome, or it goes on for too long, or it's more to me like almost lazy writing. And this wasn't like that. This somehow intertwined reality and the subconscious and the issues that this couple was having, and in so few pages. I read a lot of Marita Bonner plays trying to decide which one, and she's so diverse with what she is writing, and the fact that she's able to write in this style is unlike the Harlem Renaissance playwrights really of that time. So this in itself was kind of something new and fresh, and I love plays like this. I just love anything surreal, and I think she did it. She captured it. I think it leaves me just like feeling electrified. That concludes episode 4 of Toots Your Own Horn, documenting the creation of a new kind of classical play festival. Next time, we'll share our favorite clips from our second Formidable Friday, talking to half a dozen brainstormers about festival creation. As well, we'll feature highlights from our second Industry Slam session, speaking with another groundbreaking female leader in the Toronto theatre scene. We'll also present 3 more plays under review by the Script Reading Committee as we get closer and closer to our Spring 2021 festival, Theatre Out of the Shadows.